Why should we not get rid of people who've got foreign passports that have committed very serious crimes?
Well, the question ought to be, what connection do the people that you're referring to, as a starting point, truly have to the places to which it's proposed to, in some cases, effectively exile them? And what connection do they truly have to this country? And you mentioned something very important, I think, in the introduction. The idea is a matter of principle, that everybody should be treated equally before the law. Well, I'm afraid the way deportation policy operates in this country, people are not being treated equally, because effectively deportation is being an additional punishment for some people who serve the sentences that anybody else serves for the offences that they have committed, but are additionally ripped from their family, sometimes taken from the only country they truly know. Indeed, deportation policy sometimes is taken against people not only who have been here since childhood, sometimes against people who have been born here and lived here their entire lives. That is not appropriate.
In the case of these 50, I do know there were some who left Jamaica when they were quite small. I don't know of any that were born in this country, I have to say. But so your point is, despite the fact they have, in this case, Jamaican passports, but equally it could be Romania, it could be any other country, all right? And, the same principle would apply. And presumably, Steve, you agree with me, this should not be about skin colour in any way at all.
It certainly shouldn't be.
Good.
And one of the aspects of this, which is tremendously important to understand, is that we have British nationality laws that are supposed to ensure that children who grow up in this country are able to access the right to British citizenship. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, many people who grow up in this country, and I'm afraid to say it is disproportionately black and Asian minority children, are not able to access their citizenship rights. And when they find themselves sentenced, perfectly appropriate to be sentenced for offences that they have committed, they suffer this additional penalty of exile to a place that is not fully theirs, that they're not truly connected to. They're as British, effectively, as you or I.
This is the argument, Steve, about people under the age of 12. And I understand that argument, and it's a debate and something that will come, I've no doubt, at some point before Parliament. But let's take the majority of these 50. The majority of these 50 came to the United Kingdom when they were certainly over the age of 12, have, as I've said already, in a number of cases amongst this 50, committed, pretty heinous crimes. And it seems what you're saying is that under human rights legislation, the fact that they've built a life for themselves in this country is the reason they should stay, despite having, in this case, Jamaican passports. Is that really what you're saying, that it's their human right to stay here despite the crimes that they've committed?
There might be. The reality is that a proper human rights consideration of someone who truly has settled in this country, so has lived here for a long period of time, for example, as you say, possibly not since their childhood, but nonetheless, some of the people on this flight were well into their 60s and appear to have lived here for decades, who has family here, whose connections are all here. It certainly ought to be, and properly considered it would be, a human rights consideration to balance the proportionality of effectively, again, exiling someone to a place that they have long since left, as against the seriousness of any particular offence.
What about the human rights of those who will be affected if many of these people reoffend? And you and I both know that in some of these crime categories, reoffending is absolutely the norm. What about the human rights of those innocent British citizens? Shouldn't they be thought about in this debate?
The human rights of communities who are to receive people who need rehabilitation and reintegration obviously should be taken into consideration. But human rights are not the preserve of British people or the UK. They are the rights of everybody in the world. And it certainly is a consideration as to whether it is appropriate that in relation to this flight, should Jamaica be, for some of the people who were intended to be deported, the place that has to rehabilitate them? the Jamaican people, just like the British people or Romanian people, as you mentioned, or anywhere else in the world, have a right to think that the way in which they are treated is appropriate and their human rights are not abused and they are not unduly fostered upon with people who have offended elsewhere, who have connections elsewhere.
But they have got those passports. Okay, let's try a different approach to this. What are the circumstances in which Amnesty International UK would advocate the deportation of criminals?
I think I should be a little bit careful there. It's not for Amnesty to advocate someone's deportation. It is. And if you allow me to finish, I'm very happy to answer.
Are you against all deportations?
No,
is that what you're saying?
That's a better question.
Go on then.
Amnesty is not against every deportation. We would not call for the ban on any use of deportation powers. We are perfectly clear that the way in which deportation powers have increasingly been used in this country over many years have become tremendously excessive, and many people face deportation, including some of the young people that I have mentioned, to places that they do not know and do not know them, and where it's entirely inappropriate for that to happen.
So do you think any of these 50 should be deported?
I'm not in a position to assess that because I don't know any of the 50 cases, but I'm certainly not saying to you that it's inappropriate to deport anyone. What I am saying is that mass deportations, which are often the way in which these flights are designed, rounding up large numbers of people, are liable to end up with significant numbers, given deportation policy as it is at the moment, being pushed onto flights, which is not appropriate to do.
Do you understand why an awful lot of people, maybe not in the media, maybe not in politics, but awful lot of ordinary folk, look at this and simply can't believe there are any circumstances in which we wish to keep serious criminals in this country? Do you understand why some people think that?
Well, I understand that, and I also recognise that so many politicians and people in the media say that and think that too. All I am saying is that let's start with where actually you started, the idea that law should be equal to everybody. And if we really and truly believe that, we should be thinking that particularly those who are long and clearly connected to this country, where they have served the sentence the criminal justice system has handed down for the offences that they have learned and committed in this country, that it is not appropriate to then take excessive extra powers against them that would not be taken against other people. We used to do that. We used to call it deep transportation back in the 1900s.
Yeah, I know, and that's how Australia was formed. I know, and no one's suggesting that. But hey, it's a big case. It's very contentious. We have a very different point of view, Steve, but we have a civilised debate about it. And thank you for joining us here on GB News.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.